The sun hung low over Edwards Air Force Base, turning the desert tarmac into a shimmering, molten sheet of asphalt. Heat waves rippled off the runway, distorting the horizon and making the distant mountains shimmer like a mirage. Samantha Sam Rhodes adjusted the strap of her tool bag and squinted at the massive gray fuselage of the F-35 Lightning II parked before her. Its sleek lines gleamed in the sun, almost predatory, a fighter jet designed to dominate the skies. And yet it wasn't moving. It hadn't taken off. The reason? Unknown. And the fact that nobody had been able to fix it in over 2 hours made the tension thick enough to choke on. Sam's heart hammered against her chest, a relentless drum matching the roar of nearby engines performing pre-flight checks. She wasn't supposed to be here. At 24, she was one of the youngest civilian maintenance engineers contracted by the Air Force. Her presence on this tarmac was unusual, even unwelcome. Her small frame and quiet demeanor had earned her stares, some curious, most dismissive. The weight of the tool bag she carried seemed heavier than it actually was, burdened with the collective doubt of every veteran mechanic who had passed her by. "Don't trip on the ladder, sweetheart," one of them sneered. He leaned casually against a toolbox, a veteran with hands stained black from decades of grease and metal, eyes sharp with skepticism. Laughter rippled among the group. Another muttered under his breath, "Seriously, what does she think she's doing here?" Their words weren't meant to carry far, but Sam heard them. She always did. She had long ago learned to carry more than tools. She carried focus, precision, and the knowledge that she could outthink anyone in that pit of skeptics. Today, she had to prove it. Not to them, though it would be satisfying, but to herself and indirectly to the hundreds of lives that depended on the jet performing flawlessly in the upcoming demonstration. The F-35 was more than a machine. To pilots, it was a partner, a silent wingman in the sky. To engineers, it was a complex organism of wires, hydraulics, and software, demanding patience, respect, and absolute precision. Sam approached it cautiously, every step deliberate, feeling the smooth heat of the tarmac beneath her boots. Her gloves squeaked slightly as she tightened them, hands trembling not from fear but anticipation. She had trained for this moment for years, countless late nights in dusty hangars, reviewing schematics, memorizing every circuit and panel, obsessively practicing on simulators, imagining herself in emergencies just like this one. Generals and dignitaries stood at a distance, their crisp uniforms uncomfortably pressed against the desert heat. The senator's eyes flickered between the jet and the crowd, worried that the delays might ruin the entire demonstration schedule. Sam could feel their anxiety radiating across the tarmac, a tangible fog of pressure that made the air heavy. Everyone looked at the jet with awe and fear, but they weren't looking at her. They didn't think she belonged here. They had no idea she was about to rewrite every assumption they had ever made about a young woman in a tool bag. The metal ladder leading into the F-35's maintenance panel loomed before her. Sam inhaled sharply, the scent of hot metal and jet fuel filling her nostrils. She could hear the faint whine of active hydraulics inside, the mechanical heartbeat of the grounded fighter. This was no ordinary repair. If she made a mistake, it could be catastrophic, not just in dollars or pride, but in lives. Pilots trusted engineers to understand the jet better than anyone else, to be the unseen hands that kept it alive. And right now, Sam was their last hope. A veteran mechanic shook his head, muttering to himself. "Kid's crazy," he said, loud enough for the others to chuckle. He had decades of experience, scars on his hands from torn gloves, burns from exhaust vents, and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you've seen it all. Sam didn't flinch. Experience alone wasn't enough here. She had the knowledge and the calm mind that experience sometimes overlooked. She placed her tool bag down and opened it, revealing an array of precision instruments, wrenches, and diagnostic tools meticulously arranged. Each one had been chosen, tested, and recalibrated for moments exactly like this. She climbed the ladder slowly, feeling the heat radiate through her gloves from the metal frame. Every step echoed in her chest. The laughter below quieted, replaced by muttered bets, some skeptical, some curious. She reached the panel and crouched, exposing the intricate web of wires, circuits, and components that powered the jet. Red warning lights blinked angrily. Systems had been failing in a cascade. Communications offline, navigation unstable, hydraulics misaligned. It was a disaster waiting to happen. And yet the solution might be deceptively simple or devilishly complex. Sam couldn't know until she saw it for herself. She traced each cable with a gloved finger, following the pathways like a surgeon mapping arteries. Sweat beaded on her forehead, stinging her eyes. The noise from engines, tools, and murmurs of doubters faded into background static. Time compressed into the tunnel of focus that always accompanied her work. She found irregularities in the wiring layout, small misalignments that shouldn't exist. A single panel misconnection could trigger the cascade that had grounded the fighter. Her breath caught. Could it really be this small, this overlooked? If she corrected it, the jet could be airborne in minutes. If not. A sudden gust of wind lifted dust across the tarmac, stinging her cheeks. Sam adjusted her position, kneeling into the panel and reached for her diagnostic reader. The screen flickered and whined as it interfaced with the jet's onboard system. Lines of code streamed past, displaying errors that were as cryptic as they were dangerous. She typed rapidly, cross-referencing schematics, recalculating voltages, predicting failure points. Every nerve in her body screamed focus. Every muscle tensed. Time seemed to slow, the tarmac a stage where every eye was watching, though none realized she was about to rewrite the script. Below, the laughter had stopped. The skeptical murmurs had faded into a tense silence. Mechanics and pilots alike were now craning their necks, unsure why she had taken so long. The general's eyes narrowed, scanning the panel from a distance, and the senators whispered amongst themselves. Sam's heart beat in sync with the jet's electrical hum, each pulse a countdown. The moment of truth was approaching, the first fix, the first test. She could either succeed spectacularly or fail publicly in front of the most important audience she had ever faced. Her fingers trembled slightly as she connected the first corrected line, and the red warnings shifted. 1, 2, 3 alarms ceased. A hush fell over the tarmac. The veterans below stared at her in disbelief. She adjusted a relay, recalibrated a sensor, and the cockpit screen stabilized further. She allowed herself a momentary breath, sensing the jet settling into a rhythm, like a heartbeat resuming after sudden shock. But she knew better than to celebrate too soon. The F-35 was alive but not fully restored. Something deeper lurked, waiting to reveal itself. And when it did, everyone would be watching. The commander's hands tightened around his earpiece. Pilots exchanged quick, uneasy glances. Sam's eyes scanned the panel again, tracing hidden anomalies, following the faintest warning indicators. This was far from over. Every minute mattered. Every wire mattered. Every second could determine whether the F-35 would perform flawlessly or fail spectacularly in the demonstration that the entire nation would watch. Sam tightened her gloves again, squared her shoulders, and prepared to dive deeper into the heart of the jet, ignoring the doubts and disbelief surrounding her. They had laughed at her. Soon, they wouldn't be able to look away. Sam's fingers hovered over the panel as the hum of the F-35 systems filled her ears, a metallic symphony of danger and potential. Every wire, every relay, every sensor felt alive beneath her gloves, as if the jet itself were testing her resolve. She traced a line from the flight control module to the hydraulic subsystem, her mind moving faster than her fingers. A faint anomaly pulsed on the diagnostic screen, a small but crucial irregularity in the current that no one else had noticed. Her pulse accelerated. One wrong move and the fighter could become a paperweight, or worse. Below, the skeptics had begun to whisper. A mechanic muttered, "She's reading the wrong output, you'll fry it." Another scoffed. But no one dared step closer. The general's eyes narrowed, the senators leaned forward, all curiosity now edged with apprehension. Sam's lips pressed together. She didn't need their belief, she only needed precision and timing. She inhaled sharply, steadying herself. Years of training, nights hunched over schematics and simulators, came alive in her muscle memory. She could feel the jet's pulse, almost like it was breathing alongside her. She had been preparing for this moment her entire life. Her first move, recalibrating the power distribution network. A misrouted current spike had caused cascading failures in the navigation and avionics systems, something a dozen veteran engineers had overlooked in the frenzy. Sam knelt, her gloved hand steady, as she disconnected a small terminal, rerouted the wiring along its proper path, and reconnected it with a satisfying click. The red lights flickered and dimmed slightly. She let herself a breath, but only a moment. There was still more. A senior tech's voice cut through the tense silence. "Don't touch that sensor, it's live, she'll get fried." Sam didn't flinch. She handled live circuits countless times. She adjusted the sensor, gently nudging it back into alignment, watching as the warning lights on the dashboard stabilized. A slow murmur rippled across the flight line. Mechanics exchanged incredulous glances. Was she really doing this? The commander's jaw tightened as he watched, calculating the risk. The jet remained silent, obedient only to Sam's careful ministrations. She crouched lower, peering into the cockpit's hidden diagnostics panel. The navigation system had been looping in a fail-safe pattern, locked in emergency mode, and no one could figure out why. Sam's eyes scanned rows of micro-indicators, scanning for inconsistencies. Her heart beat faster as she spotted a corrupted sequence in the flight control firmware, a single line of code causing a feedback loop that prevented takeoff readiness. She didn't hesitate. Typing quickly, she executed a precise command to bypass the corrupted sequence temporarily, allowing the system to reset. Screens flickered from red to amber, then green. The jet was responding, but barely. She climbed down from the cockpit, moving swiftly to the rear fuselage where the fuel sensors were misreporting pressure levels. The warning lights had stubbornly refused to clear, and the demonstration couldn't go on with an F-35 reporting fuel starvation midair. A mechanic muttered behind her, "She's crazy, touching fuel lines like that." Sam ignored him. Her gloved hands danced over valves and pressure gauges, recalibrating, sealing, adjusting. The hiss of escaping air made her eyes water, but she persisted. Finally, the fuel readout stabilized. Green lights blinked. She allowed herself a small exhale. For the first time, the jet felt like it was obeying her commands. Then came the hydraulics. A series of misaligned actuators had caused the landing gear doors to resist commands. Sam knelt beside the assembly, her palms slick with sweat despite the gloves. Each movement required perfect timing. One slip, and the actuators could jam completely, making takeoff impossible. She studied the mechanism like a puzzle, visualizing the forces in play, predicting their behavior. With careful adjustments, she aligned the pistons and re-engaged the system. Slowly, the landing gear doors cycled smoothly in a test sequence. The system's green light confirmed success. The murmurs below turned into stunned silence. Sam's heart thumped, but there was no time to celebrate. She climbed back into the cockpit, scanning the avionics displays for remaining alerts. One stubborn alarm pulsed in the corner, a fuel sensor discrepancy still unaccounted for. Sam's mind raced. She traced the wiring and discovered a tiny grounding fault, almost invisible beneath insulation tape. Without hesitation, she corrected it, soldering a microconnection and ensuring the grounding was perfect. The alarm vanished. Green lights lit the panel. The jet's nervous system, once chaotic and screaming for attention, was now coherent, almost calm. Sam leaned back slightly, exhaustion starting to creep in. Outside, the air on the tarmac was electric. Mechanics who had mocked her earlier now stared, mouths agape. Even the commander's posture had shifted, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes calculating. Senators and journalists pressed forward, cameras flashing as they captured every tense moment. Sam was aware of all of it but didn't allow herself distraction. She had to run one final diagnostic sequence before she could be certain. Fingers flying across the diagnostic terminal, she monitored system responses in real time. Lights blinked, voltages normalized, hydraulic feedback aligned perfectly. The F-35's electronic heartbeat slowed, steadying under her care. Captain Hayes, the pilot, stepped forward, removing his helmet. A seasoned aviator, he had flown hundreds of missions, and his presence alone radiated confidence and authority. But now he looked cautious, studying Sam as if trying to understand how someone so small could command such a massive machine into obedience. "Everything ready?" he asked, voice low but firm. Sam nodded. She had stabilized the systems, corrected misaligned circuits, recalibrated sensors, and resolved fuel and hydraulic anomalies. The jet could fly, but she didn't tell him that outright. "Nearly," she said, eyes on the displays. "There was one final check." She initiated the flight control diagnostics, watching every readout flicker as the F-35 systems communicated with the base network. The jet's nervous system had been chaotic, but now it was singing a coherent song. Alarms ceased. Indicators confirmed readiness. The jet was alive and listening, but it was still a wild beast in the hands of anyone else. Sam's pulse raced. The tension around her was palpable. The tarmac had gone quiet, everyone holding their collective breath. She leaned back, scanning the F-35's panels one last time, fingers poised. Her eyes met those of the mocking mechanic who had sneered at her just an hour ago. His face had shifted from arrogance to disbelief. "How?" he whispered, shaking his head. Sam didn't answer. There was no time. She felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The jet would fly, and all eyes, pilots, generals, journalists, were about to witness the culmination of her work. She stepped down from the cockpit ladder, gloves still tight, heart hammering. Every muscle in her body was tense with anticipation. The ground crew watched silently. Even the veteran mechanics who had scoffed moments ago now shifted uneasily, unsure of how to react. The F-35, once a grounded, screaming machine of chaos, now seemed almost serene, ready for flight under the touch of those hands they had underestimated. And then from the pilot's cockpit came a faint hum of engines beginning to prime. It was the sound of life returning, of possibility. Sam's breath caught. The jet's canopy reflected the sun, gleaming like a predator's eye. She tightened her gloves one last time, ready to take responsibility for what came next. Below, the crowd sensed it too, the pause before history, before action, before triumph. Somewhere in that tense silence, she realized. They had laughed at her carrying the tool bag. But in minutes, they were going to freeze in disbelief at what she had just done. The F-35 Lightning II hummed under Sam's hands like a restrained predator, every system now responding with surprising precision. She had stabilized the avionics, hydraulics, and fuel networks, but the jet was still temperamental. One wrong adjustment, one overlooked anomaly, and all her careful work could unravel in seconds. Sweat dampened her gloves, and the desert sun bore down on her neck as she crouched beside the cockpit, eyes scanning every readout. She could feel the collective gaze of generals, senators, and mechanics on her back, weighing her as if she were part of the aircraft itself. Captain Hayes, the pilot, approached cautiously, helmet tucked under his arm. His boots crunched against the tarmac, the only sound besides the soft mechanical hum. "You really think it's ready?" he asked, his voice low but edged with the curiosity of a man who had faced far more danger than any civilian could imagine. Sam didn't answer immediately. She had to be precise. "It's responsive," she said finally. "But there's a grounding fault in the tail section. Minor but critical for stabilization." The tail section. Sam's mind raced. That part of the F-35 controlled pitch and yaw, essential for maneuvering at high speeds and executing complex aerial patterns. Even the slightest misalignment could spell disaster in a demonstration, or worse, during combat. Sam signaled to a ground crew member for a portable diagnostic kit and climbed to the rear fuselage. Her gloves scraped against heated metal as she knelt beside the tail assembly, eyes narrowing at a nearly invisible misconnection. "Kid, that's a live panel," a mechanic warned. "One wrong touch and—" "I know," Sam cut him off sharply, tone firm but controlled. She didn't flinch. She had been here before in the simulator countless times in practice hangars, correcting live circuits that had refused to cooperate. Her fingers traced the tiny connection point, and with a delicate twist and reconnection, she sealed the faulty grounding. Lights on the display blinked from warning red to solid green. She exhaled, but only slightly. One small correction wasn't enough. Inside the cockpit, Hayes ran pre-flight simulations, moving the jet's controls and monitoring responses. The F-35 shivered slightly, a muscle twitch in the airframe as if acknowledging her work. But then an unexpected alert flashed across the main display: hydraulic feedback misalignment in the nose gear. Sam's heart skipped. The nose gear controlled takeoff orientation. A malfunction could prevent liftoff or worse, cause the jet to veer violently off the runway. She darted forward to the nose landing gear assembly, crouching low in the hot dust. Her gloves slid along metal rods and cylinders as she traced the hydraulic lines, adjusting valves and realigning sensors. Sweat dripped from her forehead into her eyes, stinging sharply, but she refused to step back. The ground crew hovered, unsure whether to intervene, unsure whether to watch. Sam's mind worked at lightning speed, calculating pressure ratios, actuator alignment, fluid dynamics, while her hands executed perfectly, minute adjustments with maximum impact. The jet's cockpit indicators stuttered as she corrected the final hydraulic misalignment. 1, 2, 3 lights shifted from amber to green. The nose gear felt solid under her hands. She straightened slowly, muscles aching, and signaled Hayes. He moved the controls again, and this time the F-35 responded without hesitation. The jet seemed almost alive. For the first time, Sam allowed herself a fraction of satisfaction. But a nagging thought persisted: she was not finished. From the corner of her eye, she noticed a flicker in the auxiliary power unit. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to catch her attention. The warning lights in the rear fuselage panel were cycling inconsistently. Sam approached cautiously, hand hovering over the diagnostic interface. One false move and the jet could shut down entirely, requiring hours or days of repair. Her pulse raced, but her movements remained steady, trained, deliberate. She interfaced with the auxiliary power unit, scanning through lines of code and voltage readings. There it was, a tiny feedback loop in the power management module causing intermittent surges. She recalculated the calibration, inserted a temporary bypass sequence, and executed the adjustment. Lights stabilized. The auxiliary power hummed smoothly. Sam exhaled fully this time, relief mixing with adrenaline. She knew the jet was nearly ready for controlled engine start and taxi. Below, the reaction of the crowd had shifted from disbelief to cautious admiration. The mocking mechanic who had doubted her now leaned on the toolbox, jaw tight, eyes glued to her hands. Hayes removed his helmet, scanning her movements carefully. Generals whispered into earpieces, senators exchanged questioning glances. The tension on the tarmac was nearly unbearable. One wrong signal, one overlooked fault, and the demonstration, and perhaps Sam's reputation, would end in disaster. Then came the unexpected. A new alert blinked on the cockpit display, rapid and insistent. A sensor in the left engine intake reported abnormal airflow patterns. Sam's stomach tightened. Engine anomalies could not be ignored. She sprinted to the intake, crouching to inspect the intricate network of ducts, valves, and sensors. Dust swirled around her boots. Her fingers worked with precise movements, recalibrating the sensor, reconnecting misaligned circuits, and sealing a microscopic leak that could have caused catastrophic turbulence at high speed. The air around the tarmac seemed to hold its breath. Hayes' voice crackled over the intercom. "Status." Sam's hands didn't stop. "Stabilized. Readings nominal," she reported. A pause. Then Hayes allowed himself a nod. "Good. Let's see what she's got." Sam climbed back from the intake, muscles screaming in protest from crouching and stretching in the unforgiving sun. She wiped her brow and adjusted gloves that were now damp with sweat. The jet's systems were responding beautifully, but she knew better than to relax. There was still one critical test: pre-flight engine start under full load. If anything failed during this phase, the jet could stall, engines could flame out, and the demonstration would be ruined. As she moved to the cockpit ladder, Sam felt a strange sense of calm amid chaos. Her years of preparation, countless nights in quiet hangars, late evenings under fluorescent lights studying manuals and schematics, had led to this moment. She was ready. The skeptics and doubters had faded into irrelevance. The jet's pulse matched her own. Hayes climbed in and started pre-flight procedures. Sam monitored every dial, every reading, every subtle vibration through her instruments. The engines roared to life, a sound that reverberated through the tarmac and echoed off distant mountains. The F-35 shuddered, then smoothed, as if it were acknowledging her command. Green lights blinked across every panel, indicating stable systems. The ground crew and officials exhaled in unison. Even the mocking mechanic's eyes widened, disbelief etched on his face. But Sam noticed the smallest irregularity in the flight control feedback, a minute lag that could affect takeoff maneuvering. She adjusted the software interface in real time, recalibrating sensor input and actuator response. Hayes moved the controls slightly, and the jet responded instantly, perfectly balanced. Sam leaned back, muscles trembling from exertion and adrenaline. She had done it. She had brought the F-35 Lightning II from grounded chaos to controlled readiness in minutes, a feat that even veteran engineers struggled to achieve. The tarmac erupted in murmurs and whispered astonishment. Senators and generals exchanged incredulous glances. Hayes removed his helmet fully, eyes locked on Sam, a mixture of respect and disbelief written across his face. You fixed it," he said, voice low. "All of it," Sam nodded, still focused on monitoring systems, aware that the jet was a living machine and one mistake could undo everything. The crowd's tension didn't dissipate entirely. They had witnessed brilliance, but the jet had not yet moved. Engines idled, wings gleaming in the desert sun, systems humming in perfect synchrony. The final test, the taxi and controlled takeoff, was still ahead. Sam's pulse matched the metallic heartbeat beneath her gloves. She had stabilized the F-35, but nothing was safe until it was airborne. She climbed down slowly, standing tall, tool bag at her side, ready for the next phase. And in that moment, for the first time, the ground crew and mechanics who had mocked her, laughed at her carrying a tool bag, or doubted her ability, froze. Their disbelief was total. They were about to witness a young engineer's work take the mightiest fighter jet in the world from the brink of disaster to full operational readiness, minutes before the demonstration. Sam's heart pounded. The F-35 was alive. The challenge was only just beginning, and everyone on the tarmac, for reasons they didn't yet understand, was about to watch history unfold. The roar of the engines pulsed across the tarmac as Sam stood back, tool bag at her side, gloves still damp with sweat. The F-35 Lightning II gleamed under the late afternoon sun, sleek, deadly, and obedient, for now. Captain Hayes climbed into the cockpit, helmet back in place, fingers resting on controls with the practiced ease of someone who had flown hundreds of missions. The jet shuddered lightly as systems engaged, a barely perceptible quiver that told Sam it was alive, listening, responsive, but still unpredictable. Sam's heart pounded. Years of preparation had led to this moment. Every misaligned wire, every misbehaving sensor, every stubborn hydraulic valve, she had corrected them all. But now the real test began. The jet had to move under its own power, taxi down the runway, and prepare for takeoff without a single system failure. One mistake could ruin everything. She tightened her gloves, eyes scanning every indicator, every readout, every subtle twitch in the airframe. "Ready for taxi check," Hayes' voice crackled through the intercom. Sam nodded. Her fingers hovered near the diagnostic tablet, ready to react instantly. The ground crew cleared the runway, stepping back in tense formation. Generals, journalists, and visiting senators watched in a silent anticipation, the air thick with heat and suspense. Even the mocking mechanics who had doubted her now stood in quiet disbelief. Hayes eased the throttle forward, and the F-35 began to move, slow at first, then steadily gaining momentum. Sam crouched slightly, eyes glued to the displays, monitoring hydraulics, sensors, and engine output. The nose gear, tail actuators, and landing gear responded perfectly, until a sharp alarm cut through the hum of the engines. The left main landing gear indicator flashed urgent red. Sam's pulse skyrocketed. She sprinted to the assembly, dust swirling around her boots, gloves tightening on the metal struts. The actuator had jammed slightly, not catastrophic, but enough to throw the taxi alignment off. Mechanics froze, unsure if they should intervene. Sam ignored them. With precise movements, she realigned the actuator, manually cycling the hydraulic system. The warning light switched back to green. Hayes' voice came over the intercom, taut with concentration. "Status." "Stable," Sam said, voice clipped, adrenaline surging. She didn't move yet, sensing there was more. The F-35 rolled forward smoothly now, but her eyes caught a faint irregularity in the yaw sensor. A millisecond delay in readings could cause a dangerous veer at high speeds. Sam's hands moved deftly over the diagnostic interface, recalibrating, correcting offsets, adjusting control surfaces in real time. The jet responded instantly, almost as if acknowledging her skill. The crowd on the tarmac shifted, murmurs rising. Senators whispered to each other, journalists leaned forward, snapping photos and recording video. Mechanics who had mocked her now gawked, eyes wide, unsure how to process what they were witnessing. Sam's lips pressed into a thin line. She had brought the F-35 this far, but she couldn't let excitement compromise focus. Hayes increased throttle. The F-35 surged forward, wings cutting the desert air, systems humming perfectly. Sam crouched by the nose gear once more, scanning for stress points and monitoring sensor feedback. The air pressure indicators were stable, hydraulic lines were smooth, and engine intake readings normalized. Yet a subtle vibration caught her attention, not catastrophic but enough to make her hesitate. A microfracture in the stabilizer housing. She couldn't risk it. She knelt closer, examining the assembly with a flashlight and magnifier, sweat dripping into her eyes. The tail stabilizer shivered under her touch. Her mind calculated the forces, the load distribution, and the potential for failure. One wrong adjustment could make the jet lurch dangerously off course during takeoff. Sam held her breath, realigned a tiny actuator, tightened a bolt she had left slightly loose earlier, and recalibrated the feedback loop in the control software. Hayes felt the correction instantly, his hand steadying the stick. The warning lights faded. The stabilizer was balanced, responsive, ready. A low wind swept across the runway, carrying dust and the scent of jet fuel. Sam's eyes darted to the engine intake. The airflow sensor, which had given her trouble earlier, now held stable, registering perfect readings. But as she moved back to her monitoring station, a new alert blinked. The auxiliary power unit reported voltage fluctuation, minor but potentially destabilizing during high-throttle maneuvers. Sam's pulse accelerated. She sprinted to the rear fuselage, fingers flying over wires and circuits, checking grounding points, recalibrating control modules. The display flickered red once, twice, then settled. Green. Steady. Hayes advanced throttle again. The F-35 surged, tires gripping the tarmac, engines roaring in a symphony of power. Sam crouched low, monitoring every readout, heart pounding. This was it, the moment where preparation met risk. Every adjustment she had made over the past hour would determine whether the jet could safely lift off. Then came the unexpected. A hydraulic feedback loop in the nose gear flashed red again, rapid and insistent. Sam's stomach dropped. It was minor, a millisecond delay, but enough to throw off takeoff orientation. She darted to the nose gear assembly, gloves skimming metal, making micro-adjustments in real time. Hayes felt the difference immediately, countering with subtle stick movements. The jet responded perfectly. Green lights confirmed the system was nominal once more. The tarmac seemed to hold its breath. Ground crews, journalists, senators, and generals watched in tense silence. Even the mechanics who had laughed at her before now shifted uneasily, unsure how to react to her speed, precision, and calm under pressure. The jet rolled steadily down the runway, tires gripping the asphalt, engines alive with controlled fury. Hayes glanced at Sam. "She's perfect," he muttered, barely audible over the roar of the engines. Sam allowed herself one brief breath, but her eyes never left the displays. There was always another system, another sensor, another potential failure. The F-35's nervous system was alive, responding instantly to her corrections, but she couldn't underestimate the machine. Every panel, every readout, every pulse of electricity mattered. And yet, for the first time, she sensed a rhythm, the jet's mechanical heartbeat syncing with hers, a fragile harmony forged in tension, sweat, and skill. Hayes signaled that he was ready for the next stage, taxiing at full pre-takeoff speed. Sam adjusted minor actuator calibrations on the diagnostic tablet, ensuring landing gear, tail stabilizers, and control surfaces were fully aligned. The engines roared louder, vibrations coursing through the tarmac. The jet rolled faster, faster, wheels gripping asphalt, aerodynamic surfaces responding in real time. Green lights dominated the cockpit displays. Systems were stable. The wind gusted stronger, carrying clouds of dust that swirled around Sam's boots. Her pulse matched the engines, rapid and steady, controlled by experience and instinct. The F-35 was alive, roaring, almost impatient for liftoff. Hayes' hands rested on the stick with perfect control, the confidence of a pilot who trusted, finally, that every system was responding as it should. And then a subtle vibration, barely perceptible, shivered through the fuselage. Sam's eyes narrowed. She crouched low, scanning indicators. Minor, localized, but enough to require her immediate attention. She adjusted a stabilizer, tightened a control linkage, and recalibrated a sensor. Lights confirmed nominal readings. The jet's pulse steadied. Hayes felt the correction, subtle but perfect, and smiled faintly. The tarmac had gone silent. Even the mocking mechanics, the ones who had laughed at her tool bag, now stared in frozen awe. Senators, journalists, and generals exhaled collectively, unable to hide their astonishment. Sam's hands were trembling slightly, but her focus remained razor-sharp. She had tamed the beast on the ground. The first taxi and pre-flight tests were complete, but the true test, the liftoff, the climb, the first flight, awaited. And in that suspended moment, the desert sun blazing overhead, the F-35's engines humming in perfect synchrony, Sam Rhodes stood tall, heart racing, knowing that the hardest challenges were still ahead. They had laughed at her. They had doubted her. And yet, she had transformed the F-35 from grounded chaos into obedient readiness. But the jet, alive and impatient, seemed to whisper a warning. The sky would be far less forgiving than the runway. The F-35 Lightning II rumbled across the tarmac, engines throbbing like controlled thunder. Dust spiraled around Sam Rhodes' boots as she crouched beside the nose gear, monitoring every display with hawk-like focus. Captain Hayes had eased the throttle forward testing system responses at takeoff speed. The jet had responded flawlessly so far, but Sam knew better than to let relief creep in. One overlooked anomaly, one misaligned sensor, could send this fighter into catastrophe. The crowd watched in tense anticipation, and every whisper, every shuffle of feet, felt amplified in the hot desert air. "Ready for full throttle, Sam." Hayes' voice crackled over the intercom, calm but edged with adrenaline. Sam's fingers danced over the diagnostic tablet, scanning real-time readouts: hydraulics, landing gear, engine airflow, fuel pressure, avionics. Everything was stable. "Go," she replied, voice firm, steadying her pulse. Hayes pushed the throttle and the F-35 surged forward, tires gripping the runway, engines howling. The airframe vibrated, but Sam's eyes scanned every readout, every subtle micro-movement, every flicker of a warning light. Then came a sharp alarm, shrill and urgent. A fuel sensor in the left intake reported erratic pressure. Sam's heart skipped. A failure now could trigger a dangerous engine surge at full throttle. She darted to the left intake, gloves gripping hot metal, her eyes scanning wiring and tubing. Sweat ran down her face, stinging her eyes, but she ignored it. A tiny misconnection, a clip barely attached, was the culprit. One precise adjustment, a realignment, and the display returned to green. Hayes felt the correction immediately, adjusting the stick instinctively as the jet surged forward. The F-35 had now reached near takeoff speed. The entire flight line had gone silent, the air heavy with anticipation. Senators, journalists, and generals leaned forward, trying to process the impossible. The mocking mechanics who had laughed at her earlier now gawked in disbelief, mouth slightly open, hands frozen mid-gesture. Sam wiped sweat from her brow, never allowing herself to look at them. Her focus was absolute. Then a new alert blinked across the cockpit, hydraulic feedback from the tail stabilizer. Minor but potentially catastrophic during liftoff. Sam sprinted toward the rear fuselage, tools in hand, muscles burning. She crouched beside the actuator, feeling the heat radiate through the metal. Timing was everything, too slow, and the jet could tip. With precise adjustments, she realigned the actuator, recalibrated the feedback loop, and the warning light returned to green. Hayes' voice came over the intercom, calm but tense. "Status." "Stabilized," Sam replied, voice steady. Her heart pounded in rhythm with the jet's engines. The aircraft's nervous system hummed beneath her hands, alive and reactive. Dust swirled around her as she raced to a panel in the fuselage, monitoring a microfracture in a control rod. It was subtle, a flaw almost invisible to anyone without intimate knowledge of the aircraft, but she had seen it before in schematics and simulations. One adjustment, a minor tightening, and the system confirmed stability. Hayes glanced down at the diagnostic tablet, eyes wide. "You're unreal," he muttered, tension bleeding into awe. Sam didn't respond. There was no room for emotion. The F-35 was almost ready to lift off, but she knew better than to trust it completely. A fighter jet this advanced had layers of redundancies. Failures could cascade unpredictably. She scanned the final set of systems: auxiliary power, engine synchronization, flight controls. Every light was green. The runway stretched ahead like a challenge. Hayes advanced throttle to maximum pre-takeoff speed, and the F-35 surged forward, wings cutting the desert air. The vibration of the engines pressed through Sam's chest. The jet shivered under her scrutiny, alive and tense. The tail stabilizers and nose gear responded perfectly. All readings nominal. Everything seemed right. Then, almost imperceptibly, a new alert flickered in the cockpit: landing gear alignment. Sam's stomach dropped. The front gear strut had shifted slightly during acceleration, a minute variance but enough to throw off liftoff. Without hesitation, she ran to the nose assembly, gloves sliding along hot metal, tools in hand. She adjusted the strut, recalibrated hydraulic pressure, and the alert cleared. Hayes responded immediately, subtle corrections to the stick keeping the jet perfectly aligned. The crowd gasped as the F-35 began to lift its nose slightly at the end of the runway. The tension was suffocating. The jet's engines screamed in controlled fury, vibrating through the tarmac, dust clouds rising behind it. Sam crouched low, monitoring systems, sweat and dust clinging to her skin. Every sensor, every actuator, every micro-adjustment mattered. One miscalculation could send the fighter veering off course, endangering lives. Hayes lifted the throttles fully, and the F-35 surged forward, wheels momentarily skimming the runway. Then a sharp jolt ran through the airframe. The left stabilizer sensor had lagged slightly. Sam's hands moved with lightning speed, realigning, recalibrating, restoring full response. Hayes felt it instantly, the jet's nose lifting fully, engines screaming in harmony. The tires left the ground, the runway falling away. For a moment, the world held its breath. The desert air roared past, the sun glinting off the sleek fuselage. The F-35 responded beautifully, systems stable, engines synchronized, flight controls perfectly aligned. Sam exhaled slightly, but only slightly. She scanned the displays, everything green, everything nominal. The hardest part was over, but the climb, the maneuvering, the demonstration were still ahead. Below, the tarmac erupted in whispers, gasps, and astonished applause. Senators and generals exchanged incredulous glances. Journalists snapped photos, trying to capture the impossible. The mechanics who had doubted her earlier could barely move, frozen in awe, eyes wide, mouths open. Sam's tool bag hung at her side, heavy with sweat and metal, carrying the evidence of her skill. They had mocked her. They had laughed. And now, they were watching her transform a grounded, screaming F-35 into airborne perfection. Inside the cockpit, Hayes tested a few rolls and minor maneuvers. The jet responded instantly, perfectly balanced, obedient to his touch. Sam's eyes never left the diagnostic readouts. One small fluctuation could destabilize flight at high speeds. She recalibrated one minor sensor, adjusted feedback loops, and confirmed perfect readings across all systems. The F-35 was flying as it should. A wind gusted across the desert runway, whistling past the fuselage. Dust swirled in eddies around the departing crowd. Sam allowed herself a small smile, fatigue and adrenaline mixing. She had stabilized the jet, navigated unexpected alerts, and brought it to life in the hands of the pilot. Hayes looked down at her through the cockpit canopy, shaking his head slightly in disbelief. "Kid," he said, voice low but carrying through the radio, "you just saved my life in this demonstration." Sam didn't answer. She could feel the pulse of the aircraft beneath her gloves, a rhythm she had earned through skill, focus, and courage. The jet roared into the desert sky, climbing steadily, leaving a cloud of dust and disbelief behind. The tarmac fell silent as the F-35 disappeared into the horizon. Senators whispered among themselves, generals exchanged nods of respect, and journalists struggled to process what they had just witnessed. The mechanics who had mocked her earlier stood frozen, mouths agape, eyes locked on the sky. Sam adjusted her gloves, wiped sweat from her brow, and allowed herself a deep breath. They had doubted her, they had laughed at her, and in minutes she had transformed doubt into awe, ground into sky, chaos into precision. But even as she watched the jet climb, a nagging thought tugged at her. Systems were stabilized, the demonstration would proceed, but the F-35 was alive and unpredictable. Anything could still happen, and when it did, everyone would be watching. The F-35 Lightning II soared above the desert, a metallic predator cutting through the late afternoon sky. The sun glinted off its stealthy surface, making it seem almost alive, a perfect fusion of human engineering and raw power. Captain Hayes gripped the controls with precise intensity, muscles taut, eyes scanning the horizon and instruments. Every system was nominal, or so it seemed. From the ground, Sam Rhodes' hands hovered over her diagnostic tablet, monitoring every feed streaming from the jet. She had stabilized the aircraft on the tarmac, ensured takeoff readiness, and now faced a new battlefield, the sky itself. "Altitude 3,000, Hayes reported calmly over the intercom. "All systems green." Sam's eyes flicked across the displays. Green lights dominated, but her instincts screamed caution. Flight was different from tarmac maneuvers, turbulence, temperature variations, aerodynamic stress. One micro-misalignment could trigger cascading failures. She traced real-time data from hydraulics, sensors, engines, and avionics, scanning for the smallest anomalies. The first alert came without warning. The left engine temperature spiked suddenly by 20 degrees, within tolerance but dangerous if it continued. Hayes felt the change instantly. A subtle shudder ran through the airframe. Sam's fingers danced across the diagnostic tablet, analyzing airflow readings and fuel mixture ratios. A microclog in the fuel line was causing the spike. She adjusted the flow electronically, recalibrated the engine management system, and the temperature normalized. Hayes breathed easier, but only slightly. Moments later, another alert. The tail stabilizer reported unexpected oscillation. Not catastrophic, but at high speeds this could compromise maneuverability. Sam's heart raced. She visualized the forces acting on the stabilizer as the jet performed rapid climbs and turns. Her fingers flew over the tablet, adjusting feedback loops, modifying hydraulic damping, and ensuring the surface aligned perfectly with the pilot's commands. The oscillation ceased. Hayes tested a sharp bank, and the jet responded flawlessly. The desert below stretched endlessly, a canvas of sand and rock, indifferent to the high-stakes struggle above. Hayes pushed the jet into a steep climb, testing pitch and roll. Sam monitored the systems, sweat clinging to her brow despite the cabin's controlled temperature. Another minor alert flickered. The auxiliary power unit reported voltage fluctuation. She had handled this on the ground, but midair, it could cascade into a system-wide failure. Sam adjusted the APU's load balancing remotely, monitoring feedback loops. Lights stabilized. Hayes smiled faintly through the helmet visor. "You're a miracle worker, Sam," he said over the intercom. She didn't respond. Focus consumed her. One overlooked sensor, one misread signal, and disaster could strike at Mach 1 speeds. The F-35 was alive, and it was testing her resolve as much as Hayes' skill. A sudden alarm jarred both of them, a fuel imbalance between left and right intakes. The jet tilted slightly. Hayes countered instinctively, but Sam's mind raced faster than any mechanical adjustment. She traced the anomaly. A microvalve in the left intake had partially blocked fuel flow under high G-load. Sam recalculated, adjusted the valve electronically, and synchronized the fuel distribution. The tilt corrected instantly. Hayes exhaled sharply, gripping the stick tighter. Sam's pulse matched the hum of the engines. The F-35 was performing perfectly under her guidance, but she couldn't let herself relax. She scanned each system: hydraulic actuators, landing gear retraction sensors, avionics feedback, engine diagnostics. Every minor fluctuation had to be corrected immediately. Above all, she watched for subtle vibrations in the tail and nose stabilizers, which could escalate into catastrophic flutter if ignored. Then unexpectedly turbulence hit, a gust of high-altitude wind, violent and unpredictable. The jet shuddered violently. Hayes countered, fighting the controls as the aircraft pitched sharply. Sam's eyes widened as multiple alerts triggered simultaneously: hydraulic variance in the tail, engine torque imbalance, micro-oscillations in the stabilizer. Her hands flew across the diagnostic tablet, making instantaneous corrections. She adjusted hydraulic dampers, recalibrated stabilizer feedback, and corrected engine thrust distribution, all in real time. The jet stabilized, but only barely. Hayes' visor reflected the sky, white-knuckled hands gripping the controls. That was close," he muttered, voice tight. Sam didn't answer. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down harder than the G-forces. Hundreds of lives could depend on the aircraft performing flawlessly, not just for the demonstration, but for the countless missions it would undertake in the future. Every calculation, every micro-adjustment mattered. As the turbulence subsided, Hayes attempted a steep roll maneuver to test agility. Sensors flickered. The tail stabilizer detected slight resonance. Sam's mind raced through complex calculations of aerodynamics, load distribution, and actuator response. She made a split-second adjustment to the stabilizer's damping system, synchronizing it with engine thrust vectoring. The jet responded perfectly, rolling cleanly through the maneuver. Hayes allowed himself a brief, astonished grin. Below, the desert stretched like an endless stage, unknowing, indifferent, while above, the F-35 danced under Sam's guidance. The alerts continued, minor but relentless: minor sensor drift, tiny hydraulic variances, micro-fluctuations in fuel pressure. Each required instant correction. Sam's fingers moved with the precision of a concert pianist, her mind calculating faster than any human instinct. Hayes felt the difference instantly. Every control input resulted in a perfect response. Then it happened, the most serious alert yet. The left engine torque sensor indicated potential overload. If ignored, the engine could flame out mid-maneuver. Sam's stomach dropped. She had seconds. She recalculated torque distribution, adjusted thrust vectoring electronically, and initiated a temporary bypass for the sensor while maintaining engine integrity. Lights shifted from flashing red to steady green. Hayes felt the correction and stabilized the jet, adrenaline pumping through his veins. The F-35 leveled out above the desert, systems green, engines humming smoothly. Hayes removed his visor for a moment, eyes scanning Sam's position on the diagnostic tablet. "You just saved us, Sam," he whispered, awe and disbelief mixed in his voice. Sam finally allowed herself a brief exhale, shoulders relaxing slightly, eyes scanning one last time. The jet was stable, responsive, and performing flawlessly under extreme stress. She realized the impossible. She had taken a fighter jet from grounded chaos to full operational flight in record time, managing multiple simultaneous system anomalies in midair, navigating emergencies that would challenge veteran engineers. Below, the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert. The F-35 banked sharply, cutting across the sky like a living predator. Hayes tested one final maneuver, a sharp roll and dive, and the jet responded without hesitation. Every system was green. The aircraft was perfect. And yet in the back of Sam's mind, a flicker of unease remained. The F-35 was alive, brilliant, and unpredictable. They had survived the ground, they had survived the taxi, they had survived takeoff and initial maneuvers. But the sky held infinite possibilities, and she knew better than anyone that perfection was fragile. Hayes glanced at her via the diagnostic feed. "What's next?" he asked, voice laced with awe. Sam's eyes narrowed, scanning every system one final time. She had stabilized the jet, tamed its chaos, and navigated life-threatening anomalies. But the demonstration was not yet over. The audience on the ground would soon witness history, and the jet was still alive, unpredictable, and waiting. And as she realized this, a subtle alarm blinked, a single, faint warning light in a system she hadn't expected. Her pulse quickened. The test wasn't over, not by a long shot. The subtle warning light blinked insistently on Sam's diagnostic feed, red against the green glow of stability. She felt her stomach tighten. A single line of code, a sensor misread, a microfracture, or an overlooked feedback loop, it could all spiral into disaster. Hayes' voice crackled through the intercom, calm but tense. "What's happening?" Sam's fingers moved like lightning over the tablet, scanning lines of telemetry data streaming from every corner of the F-35. Fuel flow, engine torque, hydraulic pressure, stabilizer feedback, avionics loops, all green. Almost. A microfault in the left engine's auxiliary sensor array had gone unnoticed until the high-G maneuvers stressed the system. The readings were inconsistent. If ignored, the sensor could trigger an engine shutdown mid-flight. "Auxiliary sensor anomaly," she reported, voice steady despite adrenaline pounding in her ears. "If this propagates, we could lose engine integrity." Hayes' hands tightened on the controls. "How much time?" "Seconds," Sam replied, scanning the live telemetry. Every calculation, every contingency she had memorized in training and in simulations flashed through her mind. The jet's pulse thrummed beneath her, alive, reactive, but unpredictable. She had never been this close to disaster in real life. Every engineer on the tarmac had watched her tame chaos, but now she faced a living, breathing machine in the air, capable of immediate lethal consequences. Sam's fingers danced across the interface. She isolated the faulty sensor, bypassed the feedback loop, and rerouted control signals through redundant systems. Lights shifted from red to amber. Hayes felt the difference instantly. The jet stabilized, engines humming smoothly. But she didn't relax. There was a secondary effect. The left engine's torque management had become slightly unbalanced, causing a minor yaw that could worsen in a climb or roll. "Correcting torque imbalance now," she said, recalibrating the left engine's vectoring control and synchronizing it with stabilizer feedback. Hayes banked sharply, testing the jet's responsiveness. The F-35 responded perfectly, rolling smoothly, climbing with grace and precision. Sam exhaled slightly. The immediate threat was contained, but another anomaly appeared. A hydraulic actuator in the nose gear was showing micropressure instability. Sam's pulse raced. The jet was airborne, systems screaming in synchronized complexity, and one small misalignment in a hydraulic actuator could ripple across stabilizers, causing unpredictable flight responses. She knelt over her diagnostic tablet, adjusting feedback loops, cycling valves remotely, and monitoring actuator response. Hayes rolled the jet in a steep maneuver. It responded instantly. Green lights confirmed success. The desert stretched beneath them, endless, unknowing, while the F-35 danced through the sky under Sam's guidance. She realized that every second, every adjustment was a negotiation with death itself. If she made a miscalculation, the jet would punish her. She had navigated ground chaos, taxi anomalies, takeoff challenges, But now, mid-flight, the stakes were exponentially higher. Then came the most dangerous alert yet. Left engine torque spike, rapid and erratic. The jet shuddered violently. Hayes countered instinctively, trying to stabilize, but the F-35 responded unpredictably. Sam's mind raced. She calculated thrust vectoring, torque redistribution, stabilizer feedback corrections, and hydraulic damping, all in a single split second. Fingers flying, she executed the sequence, rerouting power, adjusting control surfaces, and recalibrating sensor feedback. The jet's shudder stopped. Lights returned to green. Hayes felt the stability immediately. Sweat dripped into Sam's eyes. She blinked rapidly, refusing to let it distract her. The F-35 was alive, unpredictable, and now demanding her full attention. Another minor alert flickered. Left wing surface sensor misalignment. Not critical yet, but high-speed maneuvering could amplify it into disaster. She adjusted the surface control actuator, synchronized with stabilizers, and confirmed perfect readings. Hayes tested the controls with subtle stick movements. The jet responded flawlessly. A sudden gust of high-altitude wind shook the aircraft violently. Hayes countered, fighting turbulence, and Sam scanned telemetry instantly. Multiple microalerts lit up. Stabilizers oscillating, engine torque shifting, hydraulic pressure fluctuating. One false move, one missed signal, and the jet could spiral into an unrecoverable stall. "Hold steady," she shouted over the intercom, though her voice was calm and precise. Her fingers moved faster than thought, isolating unstable feedback loops, recalibrating stabilizers, adjusting hydraulic damping, and synchronizing engines. Hayes rolled the jet, testing its stability. Green lights returned. The aircraft leveled smoothly. For a brief moment, they flew in near-perfect synchrony. Hayes tested a sharp climb followed by a roll. The F-35 responded instantly, elegantly, beautifully. Sam allowed herself a short breath. But then the final test arrived, full afterburner throttle in a steep climb. She monitored every microsecond of engine response, every vibration in the airframe, every subtle sensor reading. The left engine torque anomaly threatened to recur under the extreme load. Sam adjusted engine thrust vectoring, corrected feedback loops, and initiated a temporary safety bypass, allowing the jet to climb without triggering the torque warning. Hayes pushed the throttles fully. The F-35 surged upward, engines screaming in controlled fury, wings slicing the air, the fuselage shimmering under solar glare. Telemetry stabilized. Below the ground was a distant canvas, senators, journalists, and generals, tiny figures watching history unfold. The crowd had witnessed takeoff. They had watched taxi tests. They had no idea the life-or-death precision happening above. Sam's hands hovered over the tablet, correcting micro-fluctuations in real time. She was the unseen pilot, the hidden lifeline keeping a predator in the sky alive. Then a subtle, unexpected alert. Left-wing fuel manifold pressure drop. Minor, but enough to destabilize engine output under extreme maneuvers. Sam recalculated instantly. She rerouted fuel flow, adjusted pressure regulators, and synchronized engine intake control. Hayes felt the difference immediately. The jet responded perfectly to a steep bank and dive maneuver. Lights returned to green. Her body ached, adrenaline surging, muscles trembling. Yet she maintained focus, eyes scanning readouts, hands flying across controls. The F-35 climbed higher, faster, responding to every command, every adjustment, every heartbeat. Hayes looked over at her diagnostic feed, voice quiet but filled with awe. "You're keeping this thing alive," he said. "I've flown hundreds of sorties. Nothing has this level of chaos." Sam allowed herself a brief smile. "It's alive and it's demanding respect," she said. For minutes they continued maneuvers, rolls, dives, steep climbs, banked turns. Every system, every actuator, every engine thrummed perfectly under her guidance. Alerts flickered occasionally, micro-fluctuations that required instant correction. And each time she acted with precision and confidence, proving that preparation, focus, and instinct could tame even the most complex machine. Finally, Hayes leveled the jet, engines humming, systems green, wings slicing the sky. The immediate crisis was over. The F-35 was stable, responsive, and performing flawlessly under extreme conditions. Sam allowed herself a deep breath, muscles trembling with exhaustion. She had taken a fighter jet from grounded chaos to full operational flight, managed multiple in-flight emergencies, and navigated life-threatening anomalies, all in real time. Below, the crowd erupted in applause, journalists capturing images and video, senators and generals whispering in disbelief. The mechanics who had mocked her earlier were frozen, awestruck, mouths agape. Sam's tool bag hung at her side, heavy with sweat, dust, and evidence of brilliance. They had doubted her. They had laughed. And now they were witnessing her genius manifest in the most extreme environment imaginable. Hayes leveled the F-35 for the descent, voice calm but laced with admiration. "Sam, you just changed the way I think about flight," he said. Sam didn't respond immediately. Her pulse still raced, eyes scanning telemetry. But as the desert stretched beneath them, she realized the impossible. She had survived ground chaos, taxi anomalies, takeoff crises, and mid-air emergencies. And the jet, alive, powerful, deadly, had responded perfectly to her guidance. For the first time, she allowed herself a small smile. They had laughed at her carrying the tool bag. They had doubted her. And yet, in the most extreme test of skill, courage, and composure, she had not only survived, but triumphed. And as the F-35 leveled out, engines humming smoothly, systems green, and desert winds rushing past, she knew one thing. The sky had tested her, and she had passed. The F-35 Lightning II descended smoothly from the stratospheric heights it had conquered, engines humming a controlled symphony. Dust swirled in golden eddies across the desert runway below, shimmering in the late afternoon sun. Sam Rhodes' pulse began to slow, though her fingers remained poised over the diagnostic tablet, scanning the jet's telemetry until the final seconds of touchdown. Captain Hayes guided the aircraft with practiced precision, each wheel kissing the tarmac as though acknowledging the invisible hand that had tamed the fighter's chaos. The jet touched down, the tires gripping the runway, stabilizers responding perfectly. Sam exhaled fully for the first time in what felt like hours. The crowd on the tarmac erupted into applause, cheers mixing with the roar of engines winding down. Senators, generals, journalists, and ground crews stared, wide-eyed, mouths open, unable to fully comprehend what they had witnessed. The F-35, arguably the most advanced and temperamental fighter in the world, had been flown flawlessly, under extreme stress and emergency conditions, by a pilot and an engineer working in perfect harmony. Hayes taxied the jet to a stop. Engines wound down, stabilizers relaxed, and the desert air settled. Sam approached cautiously, tool bag slung over her shoulder, gloves still damp with sweat. The ground crews, mechanics, and military personnel had frozen in disbelief during the descent. Now, as she walked toward the F-35, silence enveloped the runway. The mocking mechanic who had doubted her earlier stepped forward, mouth agape, eyes unblinking. You did all of that," he stammered, voice barely above a whisper. Sam met his gaze, chest rising and falling from exertion. "Every anomaly, every alert, every system," she said simply, tone calm but edged with the pride of one who had just danced on the edge of chaos and survived. Hayes climbed down from the cockpit, helmet in hand, his face streaked with sweat but lit with awe. He approached Sam slowly, almost reverently. "I've flown dozens of sorties, dealt with more malfunctions than I can count, but I've never seen anything like this," he said. His hand rested briefly on her shoulder. "You didn't just fix the jet. You controlled it. You commanded it. You saved this flight." Sam's chest tightened. She had trained for this, prepared for months, but no simulation or manual could replicate the raw intensity of real-life crises above the desert floor. Yet here she stood, having transformed skepticism into awe, doubt into respect. The ground crews, still staring, finally began to move. Applause rose again, louder this time, mingling with cheers, whistles, and shouts of astonishment. A senior general, suit pressed impeccably under the desert sun, stepped forward, eyes fixed on Sam. "I've witnessed advanced pilots, engineers, and technicians," he said slowly, carefully, "but never anyone, man or woman, handle an F-35 in the air like that. You've redefined what's possible." Sam's lips pressed into a thin line. Praise was unnecessary. She had worked for the challenge, for the test, for the machine itself. Yet hearing it aloud from men and women who had dedicated their lives to aviation and defense carried weight. Recognition came in waves. Whispers of unbelievable, miracle, genius circulated among the crowd, echoing off the desert's heat-shimmered horizon. Journalists surged forward, microphones extended, cameras clicking. Questions tumbled over each other. How did you manage the engine torque spike? Were you nervous? How did you handle multiple system failures in real time? Sam smiled faintly, answering calmly, carefully. Focus, training, and preparation. The jet isn't chaotic, it's responsive. You just need to understand its rhythm. Mechanics, who had once mocked her carrying a tool bag, approached one by one, offering nods of respect, small smiles, some too stunned to speak. Sam met their eyes evenly. The laughter and ridicule that had followed her all morning now seemed absurdly distant, irrelevant in the face of what had been accomplished. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the runway. The F-35, now silent and gleaming under the fading light, seemed almost serene, a deadly predator at rest. Hayes leaned against the fuselage, gazing up at the canopy where he had relied on Sam's calculations and intuition to survive the flight. "You know," he said, voice quiet, "you've probably saved more than just this demonstration today. That jet and the pilot wouldn't have survived without you." Sam didn't respond immediately. Her fingers itched, subconsciously checking systems, even though the aircraft was fully stable. Her mind replayed every split-second adjustment, every emergency averted, every microsecond where failure had lurked inches away. She allowed herself a deep, measured breath. For the first time, she felt the magnitude of what had been accomplished. A wave of applause swept across the tarmac as Hayes and Sam climbed the final steps of the podium, joining the senior officers for a formal acknowledgement. Senators and generals spoke, cameras captured every moment, and the media buzzed with incredulity. Headlines would later read, "Engineer commands F-35 like veteran pilot, miracle on the desert tarmac, tool bag hero saves fighter jet in demonstration." But Sam didn't care about headlines. The respect, the acknowledgement from those who understood the stakes, was more than enough. A small group of cadets visiting from a nearby Air Force academy approached cautiously. Wide-eyed, they stared at Sam. One asked quietly, "Were you scared?" Sam knelt slightly, meeting their eyes. "Fear is part of it," she said softly, "but preparation, understanding, and focus turn fear into control. The jet isn't your enemy, it's your partner. Respect it, listen to it, and it will respond." The cadets nodded, absorbing every word, silent in awe. Hayes clapped her shoulder lightly. "I hope they remember that lesson. I know I will." The mechanics who had doubted her lingered near the F-35, now shaking their heads in disbelief, exchanging murmurs about what they had witnessed. Some approached Sam timidly, offering quiet congratulations. She smiled faintly, accepting each gesture without fanfare. As the sun set completely, painting the desert in shades of crimson and gold, Sam finally allowed herself to relax. She glanced at the tool bag slung over her shoulder, battered, worn, and still heavy with tools. It had carried the weight of disbelief, of skepticism, and of the impossible. And now it carried the proof that she, Sam Rhodes, had mastered chaos, tamed the F-35, and commanded the skis. Hayes looked up at her again, a faint grin tugging at his lips. "So what's next?" he asked. Sam shrugged lightly, eyes scanning the horizon where the F-35 now rested, engines cool but alive in memory. "The sky always has the next challenge," she said, "and I'll be ready." A hush fell over the runway as the last light of day flickered behind the distant mountains. The F-35 gleamed under the fatting glow, a testament to human ingenuity, skill, and courage. And at the center of it all stood Sam Rhodes, carrying her tool bag, a quiet hero in a world of awe and astonishment. They had mocked her, they had laughed, they had doubted her, and in the span of a single day she had transformed fear into control, chaos into order, and skepticism into admiration. The desert whispered in the wind, carrying away dust and heat, leaving only the echoes of triumph. Sam looked at the F-35 one final time, knowing that this was not the end. The sky had tested her, and she had passed, spectacularly. The applause rose again, louder, unstoppable now, a roar that matched the heartbeat of the fighter jet she had tamed. For Sam Rhodes, engineer, hero, and master of chaos, this was the moment she had trained for all her life. And the world had finally seen her brilliance, unmasked, undeniable, and unforgettable.